Hi, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It is Tuesday, February 11th, and today I'm taking a question from a viewer. This question came in over the weekend, and the question was, um, I heard that Rush Limbaugh was diagnosed with advanced stage lung cancer. Is this his karma speaking? And, I get a lot of questions like this throughout the year, and it's what can I say? It's not something that I love to respond to. In fact, I usually don't respond, and I mean no offense to the person asking the question. But I realize that this question is also there's a common misconception in the way that the question is being asked, and I thought this could make for a fun video. So, uh, okay, so here's the answer. First of all, is this who, regardless of if it were Rush Limbaugh or anybody, regardless if it was a celebrity or anybody, when someone dies, it is always their karma speaking, right? And just kind of basic level. Um, it's always your karma speaking when you die or when you're getting sick, and whatever the agent of your death might be, it's always karmic. The reason that I felt like it was important to pause and just sort of address this is because we see this a lot in the media, and a lot of people ask astrologers this or come to an astrologer with this kind of question. And the version of the question that you might get if you're an astrologer will go something like this: is my chart like just loaded with karma? Is my chart like, do I have like really like a lot of karma? And the answer to that question is you can't really have more or less karma. And in a general sense, this conversation could become very technically sophisticated the more um, if you were to talk to experts in, say, the philosophy of karma from India. But the general idea is that everything that we do in this world is karmic. Absolutely everything. Me giving this talk, someone asking a question, someone getting some news in the mail or on the TV, something happening here, something happening there, all of it's karmic. So we have to kind of redefine what karma is for people. Um, and then you come to realize that you can't really have more or less karma in your chart. So let's just define karma briefly again. So karma means action. The Greek word that's often the equivalent of karma in ancient astrology is praxis, meaning action and the things that we do. And so every action in the material world has an outcome. This is why the ancient study of astrology was called apotelesmatics, or the study of outcomes. And so when we are studying outcomes, what we're basically saying in astrology, for example, is if I build a temple at this time, will there be a good result? Or if I commence a project at this time, will there be a good result? Or if a baby is born at such and such time, will there be good results? The idea being that for every action and every choice we make in the world, there are consequences. And the everything in this material universe, all the material energies, are working according to laws of action and reaction. And of course, the laws are deeply mysterious to us, and we can't pretend to know exactly how they work. Um, but what we can say is that if you make a choice of any kind, if you do anything, and everyone is bound to act when you're in the material energy, because the material energy is like a river, it's moving, and you can't help but be moving along with it in some direction or another. Yes, you have agency, but as your choices are immediately being made into a stream of actions and reactions that just is the nature of the material world. And that's what we mean when we say karma. And every choice that we make, every decision that we make has an outcome. It receives a consequence. And so there is a sense in which our actions for the self-reflective person and the outcomes that are generated through our actions can become deeply instructive, deeply meaningful, deeply revealing, and can become a way of improving ourselves or learning something, growing in our understanding of reality, the universe, the soul, etc. So, karma is a way that we learn, it's a way that we act, and it's a way that outcomes are made from choices and actions. So when someone says, I heard that Rush Limbaugh is dying of cancer, is this is karma speaking? The answer is, well, of course it is. Of course it is. But it'd be the same if, you or me or anyone were dying. And if a person has success in life, if a person has failure, if they have pain, if they have suffering, if they have great victory and achievement and gladness and joy, all of those kinds of dualities and the different outcomes that we experience, materially speaking, are all karma. So you can't, that's the first part of the answer to the question, is that you really can't have more or less karma. There's not more karma in your birth chart than there is in someone else's. Exactly. It's, it's if we're in the material world, then we're in the swimming pool of karma. So that's the idea. And as long as we're born here and dying here, the birth and the death are karmic. And there were many different types of karma that ancient astrologers in India talked about. It's not as well discussed or broken down in the surviving source text of Hellenistic astrology, though the remnants of such beliefs are clearly there in the philosophical mindset of the day through people like Plato and through people like the Pythagoreans and the Orphics and the Egyptians and so forth. But in India, for example, you can have, I'm not going to break down all the technical pieces of it, and not that I'm some great expert of it anyway, because I am more focused on Western astrology. But for example, there is something like the sum total of all karma that you personally have as a soul, and the reactions or outcomes of that karma that you are destined to experience. And then there's only a small portion of that depicted by the birth chart that you are here to encounter and receive as the outcomes of previous experiences in this lifetime. And then there's another category of karma that has to do with the choices that we're making in an ongoing manner that will have future results right now. So there's also free will operating right now, making choices that are shaping future karma, some of which we may experience very immediately right now. Others may be in future lifetimes. Right. And there's more categories too. But another way of thinking about this is also when you look at the cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs, cardinal signs sometimes are associated with karma that is more changeable, that can be changed through or remediated. Fixed signs, sometimes more like, etched in stone, a little harder to change. And mutable signs sometimes are talked about as a karma that's transitioning, or a kind of transitional state, a critical transitional state for the karma, meaning the flow of choices, past choices, and manifesting outcomes. So you can think of your karmic field of your birth chart as really primarily, when you come into this lifetime, the main thing that we read in the birth chart is what are the fruiting results of previous karma that you're receiving in this lifetime. But everything in your birth chart in that regard is karmic. So there's not one person really has more or less. Everyone has different kinds of karma. And it's possible that some people are in a spiritual process where, their load is being lightened, or their consciousness is being lightened, you could say, in relation to the karma. But everyone who's born with a birth chart sort of, unless it's an avatar, right? Isn't dealing with, who may not be dealing with karma. Everyone's dealing with karma. There can't really be more or less of it. So that's the first part of the response. And it's a quite an elaborate science in India. There's some charts that are used, for example, to look at, some of the core issues from maybe a recent past life, or from, ancestral karma from your mother or father's line, and so forth. And it can be quite elaborate. Anyway, the second part of answering this question, though, is to just sort of redirect the question to something deeper that's going on here, which is that when people ask questions when people say this question, for example, about Rush Limbaugh, what they're really saying is he getting what he deserved? Is he getting what he deserved? That's really what the person is asking, because they don't, once we clear up the misconception that really everyone's death is karmic, right? then the question really becomes like, when someone says something like this, it's really, is he getting what he deserves? And people love to speculate about karma. For example, right now with the coronavirus outbreak, I've seen numerous posts all over social media saying, well, this is the karma of meat eating at play, because it apparently the virus originated from an exotic meat market. I think it was in China and maybe in Hong Kong even, I can't recall. But so then people say, well, that's your meat eating karma, meaning that this outcome is a result of human beings, killing I think it was some kind of endangered animal or some kind of exotic animal and selling its meat or something like that. And so you get what you deserve. That's karma. Okay. Yeah. On one level. Yeah. But on another level, we have to be really careful with this kind of thing. Let me give you a few more examples. I saw people commenting on Mitt Romney's karma after he voted guilty in the impeachment trial of President Trump. And people said, well, good on him for choosing, he's going to be on the side of history. And karma won't be kind to all of those Republican senators who voted, not to convict President Trump. Maybe. And I'm saying maybe not because I have an opinion really in either way. We're going to be making a deeper point about karma here in a minute. Kobe Bryant. There was a principal who was fired from her school or put on leave or something like that. I can't recall again. I read this in the news recently because on her private Facebook feed, she wrote, that's karma. He was a rapist because he died in a helicopter accident. Again, maybe. I saw something else recently, which was, the Rush Limbaugh thing. That was huge. I actually saw professional astrologers taking to their social media feeds and saying, looking at his chart and saying, well, of course, this was his karma. That jerk, and people obviously, he's a very controversial figure, and I don't like the guy. I'll just be honest. Even I apologize if you are someone who does, but I do not personally like the guy's style. I don't like his attitude and things that he said and stuff like that. But we're taking it to another level when we say, oh, you know what, Rush Limbaugh got cancer, and so that's his karma. What we're really saying in all of these instances is, look at this bad thing that we think about this person or that they may have done, and then we're suggesting that their death or their unfortunate circumstance that they experience is a direct result of something bad that they did. The same mood is prevalent in our culture right now in terms of the way that we respond to people when they do bad things. For example, when any public figure goes through some degree of scandal or controversy, they say the wrong thing, or they reveal some element of a character flaw. And it might be legitimate. I'm not at all trying to defend anyone here. But what do? The first thing that we tend to do is we say, well, you know what, let's sort of, we get into this mentality of wanting to wipe our hands of them and sort of judge them and say, well, they were cool, but now they blew it. And we move them from okay to bad, right? So similarly, when we look at karma and we're saying we have this idea that karma is only, for example, this kind of punitive, instructive, reactionary force, we have not properly understood karma. And also, when we have that motivation to want to see bad actions punished in some way that feels fitting to us in our understanding of justice, and when we want to see people sort of dragged through the city streets, by their ankles with a horse or something, like, shame, shame. Those impulses are connected. And sometimes when we look at our own birth charts and we think, oh, I've got a messed up chart. I must have so much karma, and I must, anything difficult that I get will be, is I'm basically, I'm here to suffer some kind of punitive consequence because of past actions that I did that were bad. And okay, while there is some part of karma that is about moral correction and that is about justice, what we forget is that the operating forces of karma are described both in the East and the West, not just as punitive, morally corrective, and sort of educational, like getting slapped on the wrist with a ruler, but they are also beautiful. They're aesthetically pleasing to the self-reflective soul. And they're good and they're just and they're true and they're beautiful. And beauty has a big part to do with it, as it has a is a huge component that can't be left out. So back to the original question. When we see, whether it's again Rush Limbaugh or anyone, um, astrology is not something that we use necessarily to understand why something is happening, why a particular karma is happening to an individual. Astrology is there to help us understand or describe the karma, which is to say, we describe death coming, or we describe loss, or we describe pain. We describe joy, we describe promotion, we describe victory. There's all sorts of ups and downs in the world. And the language of astrology is meant to describe them. But the language of astrology cannot tell us why a karma is happening necessarily. And the problem with trying to look at karma in that way is that we don't have the capacity to judge at the same level of awareness that includes perfect truth, perfect beauty, perfect goodness, perfect balance. We don't have that capacity because we're very little. We're just a little, each of us are little pieces. And this is really hard for us. We live in a world that, our Constitution tells us that by birth, everyone is created equal. Well, I've said this before, and this is something that I've gotten from some of my, my teachers, but that's a metaphysical claim, right? There's nothing about this material world that really supports that. If you think about it, people are born with different, some people can run fast, some people can't run so fast. Some people are born with, inherent aptitude for mathematics. Some are better at drawing. So everyone has different advantages and disadvantages, gifts and weaknesses, etc. There's nothing that really, if you just stand everyone in a line and kind of compare them in material sense, that says equal. And yet we believe in the way that we formed this, democracy, this project of democracy, and most spiritual practices around the world believe that all spiritual beings are inherently equal, divine children of the universe or of God. And so it's really important to keep that perspective. And the reason that it's really important to keep that perspective is that when karma's operating in our lives, there's this myth, that there can be more of it or less of it, because oftentimes that the reason that we think like that is because we're thinking in terms of the measurement of our goodness or our badness, and the measurement of our victory or our defeat, our pain or our joy. And we're thinking somehow about trying to measure it. And in the human world, because things aren't equal, we have systems of justice. We have to keep society in check, to keep each other safe. We have systems of justice. And so on the human level, it's very natural for us to see a behavior that we don't like, or that feels unfair, that makes us angry, or that is unkind or unjust, and to demand that there be some form of human justice. But when we're talking about astrology, it's really best, in my opinion, it's really best to move out of that paradigm, because once we start realizing the inherent glory, beauty, endless mystery of the soul and its connection to our source, uh, we have to start thinking about the way in which uh, karma is working in a person's life in ways that are not they're not gonna square up with our human sense of justice. Um, so you can't say that someone who had something bad happen to them, that it was simply there to teach them some kind of moral lesson or to correct them from a past action that was bad. It's never that simple. There may be some element of that that's true. We may be inheriting some difficult or painful consequences because of actions in past lives on all different levels, personally, societally, etc. But the antithesis of that is that it's also true that um, what appear to us like very good or fortunate things are often actually deeply painful for individuals, and things that look or appear very painful are often deeply beautiful, touching, and life altering in positive ways. So when we start thinking about karma and the way that it works in our lives, we should never think about it purely as some kind of punitive, instructive paradigm. Um, for example, James Hillman, who was obviously a famous psychologist, and one that if you've listened to my channel, you know I quote him a bunch. James Hillman liked to say that the soul is actually the like participatory relational meeting ground for the inherent um, complexity and multiplicity of experience. So let's break that down. In other words, the soul loves complexity. It loves paradox. It loves complexity. It loves diversity. It loves multitudes. And this is because inherently, the soul is a relational being, and the universe is like a web of beautiful relationships, you could even say. And ultimately, the ultimate sort of picture of that relationship is between the soul and God, or between creation and God. But what Hillman is saying is that when we go out and have an experience in our everyday lives, if we're a self-reflective person, which is to say we're cultivating the life of the soul within us, then every experience that we have, the more we reflect upon it, say within the space of a mindfulness practice or meditation or chanting every day or something like that, we come to see and understand multiple quote unquote reasons for the encounters that we have. We start to understand multiple reasons for the sicknesses we endure. We come to understand multiple levels of meaning, of pattern, and of so by seeing the multiplicity inherent in our experiences, this is what the self-reflective life allows us to do, is to see ourselves and our experiences and each other in this way. And that doesn't destabilize and wash away some sense of there being real experiences. What it does is it makes them rich, heavenly, right? It makes them, you start to think like the parable of the mustard seed. You think about the mustard seed being like the kingdom of heaven. You can go out and have relatively meaningless experiences that you seem to interpret in very linear ways. Well, this just meant that, and this, I just did this and it just meant that, and it was part of a functional, process that I had to go and do. But the self-reflective person can actually see the multitudes of heaven, multiple layers of meaning and importance, multiple voices, multiple teachings, inherent in anything, some that are painful, some that are blissful. And as one goes along cultivating this kind of perception of reality and of experience itself, there is a sense in which the being for whom these experiences are happening, the soul, starts to emerge. You start to think of yourself not so much in terms of the experiences you have and a limited range of interpretations available to you about those experiences, but instead you start to think about yourself as the emergent, awakening being who is the middle ground for the relationship between the soul and all experiences in an ongoing manner, in a multidimensional manner. And when you start to see life in this way, you have to start breaking out of the paradigm in your head that, oh, I've got bad karma and it's because I did something bad and there's something good. And there's one level, you could say, of our experiences that have to do with things that we did and things that we get reactions for. And sometimes it makes a lot of rational sense why one thing is happening in connection to another. And I'm not taking away that basic level of cause and effect. There is a sense in which a person becomes a victim, when someone strikes them in the face with a pie, right? And we're not trying to take away the element of the experience that makes that person a victim. But what we are trying to do is say, when you live a self-reflective life, when you cultivate the life of the soul, because the life of the soul is inherently connected to God, and because God contains all perspectives simultaneously, which inherently means that all experiences simultaneously, all perspectives simultaneously, it's just, it's beautiful, it's good, and it's true. And when you start moving into being able, when each of us start moving into the ability to see that, then we become godlike. We start developing little halos around us, right? And they're imperceptible. It's like you just start developing. If you've ever been with a person like this, and you say, you say, well, you must have felt this way about that, and they'll go, huh, a little, but I also felt like this and this, and I also felt like this and this, and it's kind of maddening sometimes. But if you sit with a person long enough, and I feel like my own teachers have been like this for me, where there's an ability to the desire for there to be an ongoing relationship living. Don't lock down what something is, what it means, what it was too tightly, because then you're not leaving room for grace to surprise you. You're not leaving room for mercy to pour through, for beauty to flip a perspective, for, or for darkness to come in where we've overinterpreted something to be good. Sometimes it's just the opposite. But the soul is the meeting ground for all of these different types of experiences, and its natural joy is found in uh, resolving complexity through the eyes of beauty, resolving paradox through the eyes of truth, and truth through the eyes of paradox. So the soul likes to do this. It's a process. It's alive. It's an organic thing. And if that's what we're doing, and if that's what it means to be soulful on some level, which I don't personally believe can be achieved without some form of committed spiritual practice, which is why I chant every day. To me, cultivating this inner space, it's not an intellectual thing, right, that we're cultivating. It has to be an emotional, devotional opening that we're doing inside, letting God come in and talk to us. And it's something that you have to do every day, really like a fire that you're kind of constantly cultivating. Awakening takes tending. We have to tend and shepherd our awakening process. And that's one of the reasons why I always love the image of Krishna is so appealing to me, because Krishna is a cowherd boy and is in some ways is like a shepherd. And so this devotional mood has to be there, in my opinion. But when we cultivate that life of the soul, you can see immediately how, even if there's people that on the level of human justice, we understand, we may think they're a villain, they've done something bad. We don't deny that level of experience, but we're also very cautious not to kill or close off the multiple levels of meaning, of beauty, of truth contained within events. And in some ways, you could say that the more that this perspective is realized within a person, I have no realization of this. I have some ability to articulate the things that I've heard teachers who I feel have some realization have explained. That the more that you cultivate this, it's as though it's not just that you don't want to judge someone because it's bad to judge in some kind of categorical, like catechism lesson in Catholic school. It's that judging someone starts to close down the ability for God or the universe or the planets or the soul to speak. And if you're in the practice of wanting to hear the soul, then you know that you're hearing the sweetest music in the universe. So in Bhakti, we kind of compare it to Krishna's flute playing. It's like reality is just singing these songs of tremendous beauty, like all the time. And we can't hear it when we judge. Not only can we not hear it when we judge, but then we're judged by the same standards of measurement that we judge others. So we're also fearful of judging, because not only does it close down the multivalent, levels at which God is speaking through things to us all the time, but it invites karma that may not be very good. I heard a speaker recently talk about the flute that Krishna plays and said, interesting thing about the flute is that it's empty, and it has holes. So it's empty and it has holes, but through it comes the entire music of the universe. So similarly, there's something about holding space for the realm of complexities and possibilities as to what something means, that allows for the music of the divine to play in our lives. And the other thing that I think is really important is that we want to become instruments in the hands of God, and we can't do that. We really can't do that when we judge ourselves, judge events, etc. When we stay open and very careful, then it's as though this multidimensional beauty starts pouring forth in all sorts of things, even the kinds of things that look really horrendous. Now, that does not mean, again, some people will take this to mean that, oh, well, you shouldn't have emotions, you shouldn't have reactions to things, you should be stoic. That's not at all what we're saying. The soul likes to dance, the soul likes music, the soul is emotional. So we become stoic and hard when we judge, because then we're closing something down. So I wanted to do this video today because I get questions like this a lot, and I see things like this a lot. And really, the role of astrology is like the ancient position of Hermes. The role of the astrologer is like that of Hermes. Who is Hermes? Well, Hermes is the guide of souls. Hermes is, when we say that who is the founder of astrology? Hermes Trismegistus. And what does it mean when we say that we're doing hermeneutics? In some ways, it means we're interpreting something. We're interpreting a text. This astrology is the language of the universe. It's the language of the gods. It's the language of the divine. In the Indian tradition, the planets are said to be extensions of the body of the Lord. So, this idea of, when we are, it's a language, it's speaking. It was called a music. You can't hear a music when you judge. So, when we jump into, well, that's their karma, or is this my karma, or that my karma, we're usually in some form of fear or judgment or measuring, and we want to stay away from that, both because it closes down the music and because judge not lest you be judged. We're judged by the same mode of consciousness with which we interact with things, just sort of like keeping all the fingers over the holes of the flute so that no music can come through. So you have to be really careful of that. We're also human, and we have to live in the world of human justice where, like one of my favorite Bhakti saints, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was a high court judge. He had to make decisions about people's criminal fates and things like that all the time. And we have a human form of justice. We can't just do away with it to dance around hearing the music as though, there's no need for human justice, right? There is. But we are smart enough, we are intelligent enough, spiritual beings, that we can hold this perspective simultaneously. We can fight injustice while also recognizing that there is a beauty flowing through all things, even though those that appear on one level to be very unjust or inhumane or difficult or painful or whatever. So that's why I wanted to just give this talk, and hopefully it's useful for everyone. You kind of can't have more or less karma. And then we got to be really careful because we are hermeneutic astrologers. We are interpreting. We are trying to use the language of astrology to constantly interpret. It's not interpretation is not finally an act of arresting meaning, of locking it in. Hermeneutics is about the ongoing dialectical of interpretation. That's why the heavenly spheres is both a music that's being articulated. Hermes, of course, the inventor of the lyre, first musical instrument in the sort of Greek mythology, but also we are interpreting a language all the time, and the sky is speaking. It's not speaking to us like a code that's like a printout that's saying you are this or this means that or blah, blah, blah. It's literally talking to us, inviting us into relational, revelatory, participatory, joyful, beautiful, artistic meaning making in and through all kinds of experiences. And when we become devoted and shepherding that process, that's when the descriptions of karma that the birth chart gives, both when we're born, as we continue to make choices and receive the results of karma, etc. If we're cultivating this life of the soul, we start to see the divine in everything. That's when you could say that we, even though we're living in the material world, we are having a spiritual experience. It's like the power being pulled out of a fan. This example is sometimes given. I've heard my teachers give this example. Everything I say basically comes from my teachers. So we just put that footnote at the end of everything. But you pull the plug out from the fan, the blades keep spinning, even though there's no more power directly in it. When we start cultivating the life of the soul, when we start hearing music arising, and that kind of letter of the law dimension of karmic reality starts to fade away. It's no longer mechanistic, it's music. It's no longer mechanism, it's beauty. When that starts happening, it's like, yeah, the underlying musical scales and theory is all there. There is a kind of tit for tat law-based sense in which things are operating, but real music takes you beyond that experience. The law is present within a great, improvisational jazz piece. The laws of music are there, but you've gone beyond them, right? You've gone from the structure to the expression through the structure of endless beauty. So that's what we're trying to do with astrology. Ultimately, that's what students of astrology are trying to do. That's what we're trying to receive. Astrologers should help us interpret the karma in terms of what we will experience, sometimes in, symbolic sort of parameters that we put around things. But the astrologer is there to help us move through that with all sorts of insight, different kinds of insight. It would be a mistake to either interpret a birth chart in strictly punitive terms. You've got this karma because of past life karma, boring. It would also be a mistake to go to the equal extreme and say, well, there should be no diagnostic language whatsoever. Everything should be freestyling, improvisation, and as positive as possible. Both are mistakes. Right in the middle, when we use astrology appropriately, we describe the material karma that's manifesting. We try to do so in a way that allows the soul to move in and be the mediating ground for the experience, rather than being grabbed by the experience, which is why the planets in India are called grahas, grabbers. The stars we can't start to see them as music until we experience both the sort of literalness of the karma and the multidimensionality of the karma. The multidimensionality of the karma has to be earned, though. It can't, and I say earned loosely, I mean, it takes cultivation to see and experience it in that way. And to the degree that we are not experiencing it in that way and we're frustrated by it, is typically the degree to which we wish that the language would just be better, with better outcomes or more positive. But to the degree that we are cultivating this inner richness, we start saying, no, I just really want to know whatever's kind of going to happen, whatever you can tell me about what's going to happen in the next year. I'm cool. I just want to know. And then I want to know, some of the deeper inner workings of these themes and patterns and symbols so that I can move through this time in my life more beautifully. So that's really, in my opinion, what the language is supposed to be doing. So that's probably more more than my reader was expecting when asking the question about Rush Limbaugh's lung cancer. But in not answering the question, I hope that I've answered the question, some deeper questions. So uh, these are all things, of course, that I have to say again, that in my own life, the only way to realize any of these things is not through some, intellectual understanding. It's through cultivating that soulful space, which um, we have to be devoted to. It's a spiritual practice. It really requires devotion. One of the things that you're going to see coming up for me in the next month, my new website will be launching, and I'll be launching regular bhakti content for people who are saying, you know what, I don't have that spiritual practice in my life right now, or a committed belief or something, and I'm looking for something that can help me daily start cultivating that. So I'll be doing bhakti content on a private YouTube channel, only designated for subscribers to my newsletter. I don't want to put this stuff out there for just anyone. I only want it out there for people who are actually interested in taking some practical steps with this kind of daily devotional practices and the teachings of bhakti and things like that. But if that part of today's talk appealed to you at all, you can sign up for my newsletter on my website's homepage. But in March, I'll be reminding everybody again when my new website is launched, and I'd love to share more space with some of you in Bhakti land. So really looking forward to that, and I hope you enjoyed this talk today. Have a good one. Bye.